After all the training, there's a point at which I presume that you say, I'm prepared to put this forward. How did that come about then, if you've unpublished novels? And
I've unpublished novels that are about this big. I still love them. If I ever run out of inspiration, which is, I suppose, impossible in some way, I will go back and rewrite all the ones, and they're good stories. They just aren't as good. I've been getting better and better at writing, conveying exactly what I mean to say. You never say exactly what you mean to say. It's the same thing as painters. You say, that's a marvellous landscape. They said, yeah, it isn't quite what I thought it was going to be like. It's never the same in your head as it is, once you've turned it into a three-dimensional thing. Yeah, I finally got through law and I joined legal aid because they'd invented legal aid by the time I got there. I'm very old. And so I had what I wanted. That was half of what I wanted to do. And I thought, right, okay, I'm good at magistrates' courts because magistrates' courts are actually more people than anything else. And magistrates' courts where 85% of all people meet the law. So it's where they need people like me who are not going to be unduly shocked by really anything, really. And who's, first of all, I was meeting my classmates and then I was meeting their children. And I remember the year when all the Jasons got to the children's court. I thought, oh, gracious, I am getting old. Anyway, so then I thought, right, I really want to get published. So I wrote some more books. And then I tried to get them published by sending them around to all the publishers in the phone book. I had no idea what I was doing. And there were no writer centres. The cultural isolation of the West was absolute in the old days. So I got nowhere. But finally I put a book called Bad Deeds at Bear Brass, which was a thing I've written about. Williamstown used to be called Bear Brass. I made a revisionist history and made the Dutch arrive, not getting wrecked on the Abrolhos, but actually arriving in Port Phillip, which is actually quite a nifty idea. And I put it into the Vogel Prize because I was still under 30. Anybody who's got a novel, stick it in the Vogel Prize. Stuff can happen. And it wasn't a very good novel, but Hilary McPhee, who was the head of a feminist publishing house, McPhee Gribble, saw it, rang me up at Legal Aid and said, come and talk to us. I went past my boss, he says, with a Derpler effect. I'm going to go and see a publisher. When I got there, they said, nice book, Kerry, we can't publish. And I thought, oh, that's all right, I'll just go throw myself under a tram. It was in Brunswick Street, big pink factory. And they said, no, write us another book, we'll give you a 2-book contract. I said, yes. It would have taken surgery to remove the 2-book contract from my hand. And they said, I said, what do you want? I would write anything, and at all. And they said, what about a detective story? I said, yes. I've been reading them since I was a tiny. I've never actually tried to write one before. And then I thought, I got what is known in the trade as the oh shit reflex. I thought, oops, okay, I'll just go home and think about it, shall I?
I think that's a pretty universal reflex in many ways.
What have I done, So I remembered that back in, when I was doing legal history at university, there was an amazing professor called Ruth Campbell, Dr. Ruth Campbell, who was the best historian I've ever met, remarkable woman. She's just unfortunately died. Lots of people are dying on me this year. I wish they wouldn't. And she said, original research is the only way to go. Don't believe historians, especially me. Go back and look it up. So I was, there were 6 women in my intake of 200 at first year law that year. And all of the other women had gone to private schools. So there was me. And it took me a while to find myself a peer group. But I did finally. But anyway, I was feeling a bit isolated. And I thought everybody else was doing legal history, my grandfather, the judge, or whatever. I didn't have that kind of background. And I thought, on the other hand, I've got to use my impeccable working class credentials for something. So I thought, aha, 1928, there was a huge strike. It closed down the Melbourne waterfront, or the waterfront all over Australia for more than a year. And it produced some extremely nifty repressive legislation. So I said, I'll write about that. So the Waterside Workers' Federation, as it was at the time, now they're the MUA, let me read their archives, and I spent a week sleeping on a friend of mine's floor in Canberra reading the archives, where they'd just taken the filing cabinet drawer and emptied it into a wooden box. So it had pencil leads, bits of shopping lists, and all. I had to break 2 codes to read Big Jim. his diary. It was quite interesting. Anyway, I learned all that stuff. And then I found all the old men I could find who were on the wharf in 1928. Because in 1928, if you were 16, you were a man. And I found two particularly, Tom Hills, who was known as Red Tom, a red rag, a wobbly. That's the IWW, Industrial Workers of the World, yeah. And his mate Tippo Hayes, whose grandfather was acquitted of treason at Eureka. Fascinating. And one was short, one was tall, and once I stopped trying to interview them and let them talk, they were the funniest. They were occasionally utterly savage. They were fascinating. So I sat there with my ears flapping for hours. I wrote my history of the thing. I also read all the newspapers, from the highly respectable Age and Argus right down to the Hawklet, a pink journal so ghastly that my great-grandmother would not let my great-grandfather read it in the house. He had to sit on the veranda, which he did with a pipe and a glass of beer, and read the Hawklet, which was full of maids' evidence, divorce, and stuff like that. It was cute. Anyway, so I read all that stuff. I did a massive amount of research. I scraped through all my law subjects that year just by this month. And I wrote the paper, got a gold star and an office stamp, and put it away. And then because I couldn't bear to throw it away, and when I was thinking of what am I going to set this time, I thought 1928. I don't want to write about the present because my clients' stories are the only things they've got. And it would be utterly improper of me to steal them. And I was afraid I would if I was writing about the common day, you know. So I thought, okay, I will write about 1928 and I will need a 1928 heroine. So I got on the tram on Brunswick Street, and as it clacked down, clack, 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 I thought, help! What do I usually do to start a story? I pick a main character. Aha! I need a main character. She looks like my sister Janet, black hair, shorter than me, 5'2", green eyes, pale skin, black hair, cut in a bobby cut. Or the young Diana Rigg, Mrs. Peel, where needed. I was going to do a female hero, and I did. And because everyone else writing the female women starting to take over detective stories at the time, this is 1988, were writing noir heroes. And I didn't like the noir heroes when they were Humphrey Bogart, even though Humphrey Bogart is gorgeous. So I didn't want to read female noir, and I wasn't going to write it. It's too despairing, it's too dysfunctional, and anyway, it's too sentimental. Down those mean streets must go a man who is neither tainted nor afraid. Excuse me. Anyway, so I thought I'll write a Golden Age detective story. I want Harriet Vane without Lord Peter, and I want to write a hero like James Bond with much better taste, fewer product endorsements, except for Clicquot.
There are a few.
Except for Verve Clicquot, and they've yet to send me a case.
Nemo Verve Clicquot?
Yeah, anyone from Verve, please. La Verve Clicquot, amazing story. Yeah, also the best champagne in the world. And of course there is of course the lovers, because James Bond's lovers, especially in the books, are very sort of cardboardy, and those cardboard blondes. Whereas I've always found cardboard lovers to be sort of flat, water soluble, and unresponsive. Yeah. So I thought I'll have real people. I'll have real lovers, and Franny can have anything she likes. So she has. Only one of them has ever recognised. Actually, he didn't recognise himself. His girlfriend recognised him. But these things happen, yeah.
Clearly they do. I have a favourite series of books, and my favourite series of books is the Patrick O'Brien.
I love Master and Commander,
the Aubrey Maturin.
I adore it.
And I love them for the depth of detail and the smell of the bilge water and the rat lines and the rigging and the septicemia and the gangrenous wound. Sorry, is anyone eating?
Enough of the gangrenous wounds, please. They're eating.
I love that, but I go back to it for Aubrey and Maturin.
Me too.
Their meeting is my favourite thing that I've ever read.
Indeed,
and I guess it's a responsibility and a joy to create a character that lasts. I think it was 20 novels for
21. It's the
21.
last one, Golden Admiral. Yeah.
Do you feel that? A sense of responsibility when you build a character? I
didn't build her. She walked into my life. when she walked into my life. No, really, I mean, I knew what I was going to endow her with. I wanted a hero like Mrs. Peel, capable of kicking the delicate parts of anyone who gave her any trouble, who would be then picking their teeth out of their hat. But I wanted someone with style, I wanted someone with ferocity and passion. And I knew what I wanted her to be like, and I was endowing her with money and position so that no one could ever overawe her. And I really didn't know what was going to happen with her. I didn't know what her name was, and she didn't turn into a character like most of my characters until she had a name. So I thought, all right, previous comments on Greek, yes. Herodotus' Histories, translated by Aubrey de Selincourt, I once read most of sitting on the floor of the op shop in Footscray, where I used to be able to go every Saturday, and Mrs. Clary, God bless her heart, used to let me read all the books I could read, gobble, 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 eat munch, and then I'd have to buy one at the end, and I only had 10 cents pocket money, so it was one book. But she'd let me bring back the ones I didn't want. The trouble is I never actually had any that I didn't want. So, but when I found Herodotus' Histories by Aubrey de Selincourt, I went, grab, you can't have it back, it's mine. And I've still got it. I used it as a guide to Egypt. Egypt is a gift of the Nile, says Herodotus, yeah. It still is. In Herodotus, there's a story of a hetero, because I was thinking I wanted a Greek name. I like Greek names, but all the Greek names I could think of were too respectable. Irene, goddess of peace. Have you ever known an Irene who wasn't dead stroppy? I mean, put it to yourself.
Here, like to...
Yep, put it to yourself. It's something about being called after the goddess of peace does things to a woman. It tries her patience. Anyway, Iris is the nymph of the rainbow. Iris, most of them. Psyche was a perfectly good nymph until she chased Eros over half the world. It's not the kind of thing I wanted. In Herodotus is a lady called Phryne, which in ancient Greek sounds Phryne. Do I have Greek speakers? Yeah, pardon my Peloponnesos accent. Sorry. But she's... Phryne is, her name means little toad, which is the quality of her buttocks, which gives you an idea about ancient Greeks. They're wobbly in a delightful way, but Phryne is how the English said it, in the same way as they said Iris and Irene, all the long E's. And she was so rich, and she was a rich courtesan, a hetera. She wasn't a prostitute. You couldn't buy the heteras company. They were talented, they were painters, they were singers, they were dancers, they were poets. This Phryne was utterly beautiful. She was Apolles' model for Aphrodite Anadomene, rising from the foam. She's win any wet t-shirt competition in the whole of Australia. She's gorgeous. And she retired full of years and bad works to buy a citizenry at Corinth. She was tried. The reason why I was thinking of her, because I'm a duty solicitor, and I'm always trying to think of another argument. I'll send your client to jail, Miss Greenwood, unless you can think of something to say, and that means louder and funnier. And bow a lot. I have a very elaborate bow that I bow while I'm trying to think of something, because he can't talk until I stand up again. Anyway, a lot of this is just, as I said, it's people. But Phryne was being charged with, blasphemy, heresy, entering the sea during the Eleusinian Mysteries, which got you stoned to death. And so her lawyer, she was not allowed to speak for herself, of course, this is Greece. Her lawyer was saying all the excuses which I used to run through every Friday at Sunshine. It wasn't us, we weren't there, that didn't work. If it was us and we were there, we didn't do it, and that didn't work. It was us and we were there and we did it, we didn't mean it. It wasn't getting him anywhere, and he finally used the last one. If it was us and we were there and we did it and we meant it, we're sorry. And that didn't work either, and he was trying to think of something, and meanwhile the most beautiful woman in Greece is going to get stoned to death, and it's going to be his fault. So he grabbed hold of her chiton, a garment held on by two brooches, pulled it off, leaving her naked before the naturally all-male Vemos, and said, could anyone this beautiful have done anything wrong? And they went, acquit her instantly.
Is that something you'd like to try in Sunshine?
Oh,
What do you think?
I'd love to try that down Sunshine Court, but one, the clients are so much harder to undress, and two, that wouldn't necessarily be a good idea. Not an argument I think I'd get away with, really. Anyway, yes, so I thought, all right, Phryne she is. And because I needed another name that was going to protect me against the kind of idiot intellectual that says, you've written a detective story, Kerry, why don't you write a real book? And since you're not allowed to hit them with a brick, however tempting, I thought, all right, I'll get a preemptive rave. A preemptive rave is very valuable as a life skill you might use with, because every time someone attacks you in a way that you know they're going to attack you, like someone who's smoking, someone comes up and says, you know that's going to kill your lungs. Well, of course you know it's going to kill your lungs. So instead of, if you've got someone who says something like that and you know that, you haven't got an answer, you say, are you aware of the genetic evils of chicken stock cubes? And if you say it ferociously enough, they back right off and disappear. I love preemptive raves, so I thought, what am I going to do? I need an intellectual preemptive rave. And as I am a most disgustingly educated autodidact with a very good memory and a good ear for languages, and my grandmother was Welsh, I can talk about Arthurian cycles until anybody wilts and goes away to find a nice cup of coffee somewhere. So I thought, all right, and in French, of course, we have, and French speakers should forgive my awful southern accent, Le Roi Pêchonneur, the Sinner King, is the Fisher King. He's in the Grail Legends. He's terribly important. Then again, in 1928, which someone showed me, A Gentleman's Guide to Paris, if you were a lady and wished to acquire suitable male company and learn the tango, among other things, you needed to go to the Rue de la Chaque qui Pêche, which is the street of the fishing cat. And you could say that all detectives are fishermen looking for clues. And very blasphemously, you could say that Phryne was a fisher of men. So I thought, okay, Fisher. So I got on the tram. I knew who she was. I knew her name. And after that, her character was instantly apparent. Once she had a name, I have to find a name for someone. The only time you'll ever find the default name Johnson in my books, which is what a book name I put in while I'm thinking of another name, is where Johnson fits the character and they're only there as a walk-in or a telegraph boy or something. Names are terribly important.
A couple more minutes, could you believe? And I wanted
talk
to talk
too much, sorry.
Not too much, not at all. It's perfect for me. I wanted to ask you about this book.
I'm sure.
I teach non-fiction, and I guess that's where my main interest lies, through journalism. But this wasn't what I expected, Kerry.
Sorry.
You can I may mean that in a good way.
Yeah.
Well, I read the blurb, and this line troubled me a little. She goes on a journey into her own past to try and solve this crime, uncovering a new way of writing about crime and herself as she goes. And I thought, sounds like one of those lines. And then I read the book, and I think it's true.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I think it's true. I think it's a very unusual book. And if anyone has read it and you'd like to ask Kerry a question about it afterwards, I'd be very interested to hear. I think it's an autobiography.
Yeah, it is.
And I wonder whether you always set out to write an autobiography. It's about a mystery. Maybe you could just briefly explain the mystery.
The man you can see on the cover.
That's a dead man.
He's been dead for 12 hours. Yes, don't panic.
There was a lot of curiosity in my house. So
yeah, but you've got 8-year-olds. He's perfectly safe. He's dead. He was found sitting on Somerton Beach. You remember the Somerton Beach murder? Yeah, but nobody knows if it was a murder or not. It just wasn't a natural death. He was found dead when he was sitting there all night. He died so gently that the cigarette he was smoking went out in his mouth and it tipped onto his lapel without burning it. He had a tummy full of pasty. He hadn't thrown up at all. He wasn't distressed. His face is perfectly calm. His cause of death was undetermined. He was poisoned by some unknown poison. In his pockets were no labels at all to identify him, except in this one, his fob pocket, was a little piece of paper torn out of the end of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a long and a very interesting poem by a guy called translated by Edward Fitzgerald, which everybody had a copy of this is 1948. So then they found the matching bit of paper. Tamam Shud means the end, but it's a Persian version of the end, but it also means an indissoluble mystery. And in the doctor's car at Mosley Street, which was above the beach, They found the rest of the book, in which there is a code which has not yet been broken by anyone, even though the remarkable mathematicians of the University of Adelaide are still working on it, and I personally think if it can be broken by computer, they will break it. In Central Station, they found a suitcase which also had no labels in it. And it also had no other stuff. Anybody who's travelled overseas knows you come back with, foreign coins and stamps and, junk that indicates postcards you never got round to sending, stuff that indicates you've come from one place and you've been to some other place. This was a totally sanitised suitcase with enough clothes in it for 3 days. He had rather a leery taste in nightwear, which I rather liked, and the shoes would have fitted his feet, and the pocket of his suit in which he was found dead the pocket had been repaired with orange barber waxed thread, which is not something, as any seamstress will know, you usually use to repair pockets. It was also not sold in Australia. There was a skein of that thread in that suitcase. The suitcase is linked to him, he's linked to the suitcase. In no case is there any idea of who he is, where he came from, what he was doing there, and what killed him. And we still don't know. Now, my father in 1948 had just got discharged from the army. He'd been stringing wires at Woomera. He was a signaller. And he palled up with an old mate of his called Killer Dunn, who was a fighter, a boxer. It was his killer left hook. He was a very sweet person, my mother says. Anyway, and he was bumming around Adelaide for the whole period. And he told me about that case when I was a child. And I should have realised there was something wrong with it because it had no end. All of his stories were really good. He told very good stories, my dad, in that, outback kind of way. That was the night the cook went troppo and went after the boss with an axe kind of story. But this one had no ending. I should have known there was something wrong with it. So when I went to Adelaide as a fruit picker, because fruit picking was a reasonable money at the time, and I hated working in factories, so I used to pick grapes. Very soothing if you want a job picking outdoors, pick grapes because you don't have to bend and you don't have to climb. Apples you've got to climb. Strawberries and stuff like that, you wreck your back. Whereas grapes you just snip, fling, snip, fling. And although when I was writing it, my snipping finger went, wobbly on me, and I thought, oh, yeah, you remembered that, do you? I used to stop in at Adelaide, and I was also going on a holiday there. So I told the publisher, they wanted me to write about the Tamam Shud murder. And I said, I'll do it, but I have to write it like a memoir because I'm tied up with it, and my father's tied up with it. My father's dead, and I miss him terribly. So I will write the story for him. And it's always a good idea to have an idea of who you're writing a story for. So I was writing the story of him. I found the picture of him sitting up on a pole in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And I wrote the story for me so I could recover from my grief. And I also wrote the story for the Tamam Shud man, Somerton man, because no one who was writing about him was sorry for him. Nobody thought about him as somebody that someone would miss. Some woman bore him. He was someone's child. He was someone's husband, someone's brother. And no one was thinking about him. So I thought I want to bring back his humanity as well as talk about my own loss. And indeed, I had a lot of fun in Adelaide. I actually was there when on the day they said that a great wave was going to hit Adelaide. Do you remember? Anyone remember? Yeah. So I was sitting on the beach with a friend of mine getting rapidly drunk on red wine. He was drinking the red wine. Actually, he was a she that day. Purple dress, you can always tell. And I'd gone off red wine after that, after grapes. I never saw another grape I ever liked. And we were waiting for the great wave to hit. And down through the crowd, down at Glenelg, down came... I swear I saw this with these very eyes. Don Dunstan in a pink safari suit, riding a camel, which sneered all the people out of its way in the way that camels do. You always know with camels they're just looking at which bit they're going to spit at. And he stood there waiting for the wave. He's not much taller than me. He had immense presence. The only time I ever saw him. But I kept thinking, Cahulan, Achilles, this wave stuff, it's not a good idea. Anyway. That was a remarkable image. I immediately had to go and look it up.
Thank you tonight, Kerry, for the wander inside your head, if I may put it that way.
Pleasure, darling.
It's been great to have you at Rotunda in the West, as you should be. Thank you very much.
It's been lovely to be here.